What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U College Hoop Stock Podcast, brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye. I'm here with Josh, and today we got some big time portal acquisitions to talk about. One more so actual portal, the other one guy coming over from overseas to play college hoops here in the U.S. Those guys would be Boogie Fland committing to Florida and Sarr committing to Duke. So we're going to talk about what those pickups mean for both programs, and also get into an updated top 10. I think we're long overdue for that with just all the moves that have been made. And we'll throw some way too early Final Four picks out as well. I can't fully remember if we did that in the last time we made an updated top 10, but we'll give you guys those today. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please do anything you can to engage with our videos, whether it's liking, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. Really does help with YouTube's algorithm, just being able to get these videos out to a larger audience. So I think a good place to start is Boogie Fland committing to Florida. This is definitely a guy that I think Florida really needed to land, just considering if they didn't, I think they probably would have had to go the international route and landing a guy who could have played that lead guard spot. And I definitely think it's important because it takes a lot of pressure off Xavier Lee, just because, again, you really don't know how mid-major Ivy League guys are going to play till they get to the high major level when you actually see them play. But Josh, I'll ask you for some of your initial thoughts to getting the news about Boogie Fland committing to Florida.
I think it's a big deal. Honestly, kind of wondered if Boogie was gonna stay or not. I personally thought he was gonna leave. This has been one of the more surprising returns, if you're gonna ask me. And then him almost immediately going to Florida kind of raises an eyebrow. I felt like there was a little bit more under the covers to that. But regardless of the matter, I think Boogie fits a beautiful role there. He has the previous SEC experience, so he actually knows how the conference works for the most part. And it's Florida. It's not golden. It's a very well strung up program as of right now. And he fits a beautiful role in that top, like that starting five. I think Florida is back in business. They're 3, maybe 2 seed at most. And this is without Alex Condon. Like, this might be the reason Alex Condon comes back and Florida goes to that.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about in the last video we did together where if they were able to land Boogie Fland and get Alex Condon back, then they are definitely in the mix to go back to back for sure. I still very much think that. And we'll wait to see what happens with Alex Condon. I think me and Josh are both kind of in the boat where we believe he's probably going to come back. But again, getting Boogie Fland is huge, just considering getting a point guard who started in the SEC last year, which was the best conference in the country. He's a guy who averaged 13, almost 14 points per game, 5 assists. So of course, he's going to bring some playmaking. He brings a lot of tough shot making. The one thing that does kind of concern me a little bit was that Arkansas started 0-5 in SEC play with Boogie Fland until he got hurt, where they kind of were able to figure some things out. Maybe instead of having 3 guys in the backcourt that are a little frustrated and maybe not super certain what their roles are, when Boogie Fland went down, he kind of was able to change things. When Boogie Fland went down, they were able to kind of like, what's his name? Forget blanking on the name right now. Both Knox and Nelly Davis. Nelly Davis was the guy. They were both kind of able to get into their own a little bit, start seeing the ball a little bit more, and that concerns me a little bit. But Boogie Fland, again, he wasn't the most efficient scorer from the field last year, nor from 3. But like I just mentioned, he's able to do a lot off the dribble. He can get to his spots, elevate, hit tough mid-range shots. And I definitely think he's an NBA player. Whether, of course, he decided to come back to school. Probably could have won in the first round if he stayed in the draft, but I definitely think if he has a big year in Gainesville, he could definitely go into the late lottery, or maybe even top 10 next year. We'll see what happens with that. But again, I think it was a really big pickup. And now I want to ask you, do you think Florida has a top 5 backcourt between Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee now?
I'd say so. I don't know if Xavier Lee is going to be the number 1 option on this team, regardless of the Condon decision. I think I might actually just go to Boogie at this point. But it's an amazing backcourt and front court, I feel, too. Thomas Howe is definitely going to be leveling the playing field on both sides. We're going to see probably growth from Michael Hamilton and the now not redshirt Oliver Rowe, who's 7'9", just putting it out there. I don't think he's going to be as big of a guy as some people might hype him up to be. No pun intended on that one. But I think there is definitely size, and there is without a doubt good shooting now that Boogie Fland is there. So
right.
Gainesville is going to be a great place to watch college basketball next year, as if it already wasn't.
Most definitely. I mean, yeah, they're definitely right back in the mix to go back to back, I think. And like I just talked about, I definitely feel like Florida would have been in a tough spot if Xavier Lee kind of is, I don't know if go-to guy is the right word, just considering all the talent they have in their starting lineup, assuming that Alex Condon does come back. I mean, you have Ruben Chinilu, you mentioned Oliver Rio, and Tommy Howe, of course, and Clavs are coming off the bench, bringing some shooting, but I definitely think it's better to have Xavier in kind of a, I don't want to say backseat, again, that's not the right word, but maybe, the secondary option to Boogie Fland, where Boogie Fland can be the, both guys are going to bring a lot of playmaking. Xavier averaged around 5-6 assists last year at Princeton. So they're going to have a lot of playmaking. They're going to have a lot of ball handling. I mean, both guys are great ball handlers. But again, I definitely think there's an adjustment when you jump up a level in college basketball going to the high major level. And I just don't know if right away that might have been too much on Xavier Lee's plate for him to handle. So I think having Boogie Fland is going to be big.
Yeah, no, Xavier has worried me a little bit. I think we talked before about how he doesn't really fit at the high major level that I thought he was going to. But at the same time, SEC was probably the best conference for him to go to, high major. And I think Florida could work out pretty well for him. And then, yeah, Boogie Fland, I think once again, he should be the number one option. But right behind him is Xavier Lee. And if Condon does come back, then we do have a little bit of a change. But I really don't see the difference between 1, 2, and 3. They can really bounce off of each other and make for a really diverse starting lineup.
Yeah. And I would just say for Florida overall, I know a lot of people have concerns about Tommy Howe being able to play the 3. I do understand where those concerns come from, just because, some people said Todd Golden might see Howe play a game or two at the 3 and say, all right, maybe this isn't the right role to have him in. But I definitely think Thomas Howe is capable of doing that. Like I've talked about already, I think he's going to be the potential All-American on this upcoming Florida team this year. But again, I think he's going to be able to handle it. I think they bring so much size. Boogie Fland is a little undersized at the point spot, but Xavier Lee brings good height at the 2. And of course, between the 3 and the 5, I mean, they're just so tall, so big, lengthy. So that's definitely going to help. And I would just say Florida probably needs to get 1 or 2 more bench pieces to back up Clavs coming off the bench. Probably preferably wings, guards who can come in and bring shooting, high-level defense. And I think Florida's in a great position to potentially repeat next year.
Without a doubt, I agree.
So yeah, I think that pretty much takes care of all our thoughts regarding the Boogie Fland commitment. Big pickup by Todd Golden and crew out in Gainesville. Next guy we want to talk about, like I mentioned at the start of the video, is Dame Sarr, who committed to Duke today, not long before we started this recording. Of course, he's coming over from Italy, one of the most hyped up guys in this portal cycle. Again, I'm not positive as to the eligibility he is coming over with. I don't know if he has 4-year eligibility or if he's played professionally and that maybe is taking a year or 2 off how long he is actually able to play in college. But I largely think he might be a one-and-done guy in college. I think so. But I think that's really important for Duke, just considering.
I don't see him staying.
Right. I don't see him staying in Durham very long either. But considering that Cedric Howard at this point is more than likely going to be staying in the draft, I know just before Josh took a look at the post-combine mock draft that I think ESPN put out. Was it, or Bleacher Report?
Yeah,
one of the two. ESPN, yeah. But they have Cedric Howard going 30. I've seen some mocks where he goes high as 19. I think NBA scouts really like Cedric Howard. And again, I think he's likely to stay in the draft. This year, I think if he comes back to school, he would have a really good year in Durham. I love the fit, like I've talked about. But again, it's no guarantee you go in the first round if you stay in school for another year. But again, getting Dame Sarr to kind of fill that wing spot role was really, really important for Duke and kind of makes them a lot better of a roster than, if they were to not get Cedric Howard back and not get anyone else. So definitely important that they got him. I definitely like the fit here more than I did Kansas. Like I talked about in our last video we did together, me and Josh, where I definitely felt you let Darren Peterson rock out in Kansas. We'll see what happens to Darion Williams maybe going there. But again, I like this fit a lot.
Yeah, no, I once again agree with you. Personally, Shire just had to get something going because losing a guy like Howard, who, by the way, was your major portal pickup, I get it, the majority of the team is coming back. You have a nice freshman incoming class. It's hard to not say those things without talking about the Coward situation. But Sarr adds the depth in the lineup that kind of were missing by the portal. Because the biggest part of the portal, for Duke at least, is getting that older, more experienced talent that can guide the freshmen. That was last year's whole thing, bringing Gillis and Cy James and Proctor and all these other guys that were, capable of helping out and Hoop, and come on, like I do understand that Sarr doesn't have the exact type of experience, given that he's also new to American college ball, but he has experience playing in the Euro leagues, which are pretty good. There's really nothing wrong with putting that in that scenario. So if he's going to be that older, experienced player for them, then I guess so be it, because Coward was supposed to be that guy for them.
Right. And I definitely think it's so important for them to have a guy in the wing that they can fall back on, just because I've talked to Josh off recording. I really just don't feel like this Duke roster scares me the way they did going into this past season in the preseason. Considering that, I think Cameron Boozer will be really, really good. Aiden Boozer concerns me a little bit. I really have not seen enough tape on him up to this point, which I probably should. Hit the film room a little bit, watch up on Caden a little bit more. But on top of that, you do have some talented freshmen coming in. Again, the Boozer twins, like I just talked about. But you also have that Nicholas kid, who I think will be really good. They probably want to be kind of like the next Con Kneppel. Will he be that good? I personally don't think so, but I'm sure he'll be a really solid contributor for the Duke Blue Devils program. But I do have to give Shire credit. You did get continuity, but those guys are bringing back. Again, I really don't know how much room for growth there really is. Isaiah Evans largely is only a three-point shooter. Of course, there's the chance that he improves his game, but I just don't know if I feel confident in Isaiah Evans being like a big time guy. I'm sure he'll do fine in the ACC, but just I think the size limitations. His nickname Slim for a reason. He's fairly slight in frame, and just the out of conference play, bigger guards that concerns me when Duke goes up against those matchups. And Caleb Foster. I mean, we're going to the third year now where we're talking about Caleb Foster potentially making a leap, and I just don't know at this point if he really has much more to improve, like if there's really any room for growth at this point in Caleb's career in college. But of course, you're bringing back Gbagba. Again, I don't know if I'll ever pronounce that right, but him, you're bringing it back. Malik Brown, who, again, those guys are going to be bigger roles next year, and I don't know if I feel as confident about Duke if those guys are in the elevated roles that they're probably going to be in this next season. And just overall, I mean, again, this Duke team doesn't scare me the way that they did last year.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much said it for me as well. Despite that, though, I think Dame Sarr does elect them to be a 1 seed if they are
Yeah,
in that scenario. Fair. Would I put them in last year's level? No, I don't really know if they could make a Final Four again, but this is without a doubt a huge booster for them. This pretty much, at least at a minimum, it secures them the ACC for another year, but I'm just not convinced by this Duke team as of right now. Maybe given some playing time, I can be convinced, but it really just goes on how good can Cameron Boozer be. Are we going to see jumps in Isaiah Evans and Foster? Are we going to see Sarr actually do what we think he's going to do? It really depends on a lot of these things. And I think because of these clauses, there's too much to distrust than to actually bring in that type of, I believe Duke can actually do well this year. Because they're going to do well. It's just Duke always wants to win the Natty. They're never shy of it, obviously. It's that legacy of being a Blue Devil. And it's a legacy that Shire needs to have, given that he just missed one last year on arguably his best season, perhaps ever, if you're going to ask me, given how good Cooper Flag was in college. So if you're going to put it in the way that I'm thinking right now, this might not be the most successful look for Duke, but it is still going to be a very good Duke team. Not
right.
Natty Final Four type of team that most people are thinking of Duke, perhaps as of right now.
Right. I think you phrased that like the perfect way. Honestly, I just think, again, I definitely am in the boat where I think that this past year's Duke team could potentially be the best roster that John Shire ever has as a coach at Duke. Of course, that's tough to say considering we can't see into the future, but of course, Natty is always the expectation of Duke every year in Durham. But again, I think it's tough to follow up the year they just had with the roster that they just had. And I definitely think that the demons of the last 2 years are going to be floating around the program, just losing the way they did the last 2 seasons. It's going to be tough for Shire. And if they end up as a 1 seed, 2 seed, then which I think they will, I think you have to give John Shire a lot of credit. But again, like you mentioned, I do think the Delaney Dame Sarr probably puts them as a preseason favorite to win the ACC. I think they will end up going on to do that. And I would be shocked if Duke ends up any lower than a 2 going into the tournament. And I definitely think that puts them up a few notches in my updated preseason top 10 going to next year, which is definitely something that we want to talk about now. I know we put out a way too early top 10, pretty close to the conclusion of this past college basketball season. For reference, my list was Louisville at 1, Purdue 2, Houston, Kentucky, Duke, BYU, UConn, St. John's, UCLA, and Arkansas. And let me tell you, my list has definitely changed a lot. I'm sure Josh has also changed his rankings going into the preseason as well. But yeah, we're going to give you guys our updated top 10 and Final Four picks. Still way too early, I would say, but maybe a little less way too early. Yeah, so I'll let you start off, Josh, if you want to throw out your
My
number
Final
one
Four.
team going to next year.
The way I'm doing my Final Four is pretty much how everybody else is doing it. Once again, it's so early to take those leaps, so to speak. Obviously, last year I kind of struck gold on Florida, but I also remember picking teams like Alabama and Duke, and I chose Houston. I chose Gonzaga in there as well. So you're going to make a couple flops, obviously, in your preseason stuff. That said, I feel more confident about this Final Four this year than I feel about last year's Final Four. I have Purdue, which is to be expected. I have Houston, and I have St. John's. The big one for me, I guess the Florida candidate, is Michigan State this year. I really feel that Cohen Carr and to some extent Jeremy Fears and Jackson Kohler are going to have breakout seasons, particularly Carr. I think Carr could be an All-American this year. He will likely be the main ball handler for this team. And Izzo just missed an Elite Eight. He's sniffed an Elite Eight by a guy like him, and you don't expect him to not go back for it. And then some. He's already said on record he doesn't even like going to the Final Four as much. But I know for a fact he's going to try and make it back. This is likely going to be one of, if not his last full year as a coach. And I just don't know how you can leave out Michigan State for this long. They haven't made a Final Four since that 2019 season, and Izzo has been on the come up recently. I liked last year's team a lot. They were once again very underrated, and this year feels better than last year. So if you're going to put it in that way, I do think Michigan State has a great Final Four, maybe even national champion upside. That said, I'm going to leave Houston as my champion. I had them there before, and I'm keeping them there now. Pretty similar to Izzo. You just don't leave Kelvin Sampson out of any picture. He just made his first natty. He probably could have and should have won that game, but I think he knows what he's doing. I think he knows all the tricks that he needs to get back there, and I don't think there's going to be a Walter Clayton to really stop him this time. So it's probably his game to lose right now.
Yeah, and my Final Four picks honestly do not stray very far at all. Really, that fourth team is the only different pick that I had. I have Purdue, Houston, St. John's. As three of the teams in my Final Four in that last kind of like to playoff year, Florida pick last year and your Michigan State pick right now. I have Illinois. I have Illinois outside my preseason top 10, but I definitely feel like I could already see the narratives in the media surrounding or just highlighting all the international players which we're going to see play college basketball this year and how this really started to become a big thing for programs to target in their offseason portal cycles and whatnot. And I just think that's going to be highlighted by Illinois and how the Balkan Five play out in Champaign this next year. I really think they're a lot deeper than what they were this past year. And I think Brad Underwood really might strike gold here. I mean, he kind of already has the last 2 years with international prospects. This past year with Kasparis Jakuchonis. 2 years ago with the likes of Marcus Damask. A Visage has already been a good player for them. And now they have his younger brother, Big Z. Big Zavonimir Visage coming in to play the 4 spot next to his big bro. Of course, they got other guys. They're bringing back Kylan Boswell. They got, I don't know how I always blank on this guy's name. Andre Stojakovic, yeah, he's going to be a really big player in the Big Ten this upcoming season.
He's super underrated, I think. He could also
most definitely. And I think it was due time that he stepped up in a level and played at a legit high major school. I mean, not to slight Stanford and Cal in any way, shape, or form, but let's be honest, he's too good of a player to be playing at a school like that out on the West Coast. And I think now it's time he gets to show the rest of the country how good he really is. And I really do like the way this team is shaping out to be. Now, I know they can, but I don't think they'll roll out the full Balkan starting 5, just considering Boswell is going to be there. Will Riley's running back again, too. So that stuff, he's going to definitely compete for minutes. But I really like what Brad Underwood's built going into this next season. So that's going to round out my Final Four. I think this is a good point to transition over to our updated preseason top 10. I have Purdue number 1. Well, actually, before I get to that, I forgot to throw my national champ. I also have Houston. I very much feel there's no team in the country that I trust more than Purdue going into the season, but I definitely think they'll make the Final Four, and I think they will make the national championship game. But the thing that worries me the most is that I worry about the athletic limitations of their starting five. But just between Braden, Fletch, TKR, I assume Oscar Meyer will probably be in the starting lineup along with the likes of Oscar Clough or Omer Meyer, not Oscar Meyer. Omer Meyer with Oscar Clough at the five. But again, there's just like you're missing the Lance Jones kind of piece on this team, a guy who's a lockdown defender and brings a lot of athleticism, which I think CJ Cox could potentially compete for a starting role just because of that. He brings a little more athleticism than the rest of those guys I just mentioned. But again, that kind of worries me a little bit. They don't have a true lockdown guy defensively on the wing or the perimeter. And I worry about how they're going to handle matches when they have a dynamic guard, which or wing that they need to shut down. And I think I think the one thing that you could point to as their weakness this past season was their lack of talent. And they have a surplus of talent now with the five stars, which Kelvin Sampson landed in recruiting, which are going to be playing their first year of college basketball out in Houston. And I like what they've brought in terms of brought back in terms of their continuity. They're bringing back Joseph Tugler. They're getting Emmanuel Sharp back, who I'm sure is going to have a huge chip on his shoulder, just considering him kind of messing up that last play that Houston ran in the national championship game. And if they get Miles Uzan back, which me and Josh, I believe, both think he will be running back in Houston, then that's going to be huge to have him running the point, bring a lot of veteran leadership, which they're going to need considering how much youth they have on this team. Like I've talked about already. I worry a little bit just with the freshmen. A lot of times these five-star freshmen come in and want to be on ball a lot. And the reality is that they're not. There's going to be some of those guys who probably end up a little unhappy. And if Kelvin Sampson can manage that and balance the talent he has in the youth, combined with what he's bringing back in the veteran leadership, the culture that they've already built in Houston, then I think Houston's going to be really, really good and probably my pick to win the national championship.
I definitely see. We both chose the same team.
Right. Yeah, so now we can get into our updated top 10s. Like I mentioned before, I had that little relapse there. Purdue is my number one team going to preseason. You're bringing back Fletch and Braden Smith. That is, in my eyes, the best backcourt in the country going to next year. Really, really great job by Matt Painter to go into the portal, which he really hasn't done much of in the past, but he got some big pickups. Oscar Clough probably highlighting this transfer class. And then you bring in Omer Meyer from overseas, which I think he has a chance to really light it up this year out in West Lafayette. And of course, you have TKR, who, you literally look at this team, you're bringing back, in a sense, two All-Americans, with Braden Smith being on the first team last year and TKR being an honorable mention. I think TKR will be on an All-American team next year. And again, the continuity that they have in Purdue, it's really unique to see that all their homegrown talent of guys who have progressed from their freshman seasons to now, that class of Fletch, TKR, and Braden Smith, I think it's really, really great. And as a UConn fan, of course, I want UConn to win the Natty, but if they don't, I would very much like to see Purdue win the Natty. I've told Josh I would think it'd be the storybook finish to the careers of those guys in this upcoming senior class.
Thank you on that one. I kind of have a little bit of flip. I'm choosing Houston, and this is not because of bias. This is just once again because of what I said before. The Final Four picks. Houston's the better team right now. The experience is there, and like I said before, Uzan is probably coming back, at least in my mind. So that just adds to the additional depth. I do have Purdue at 2, though, so pretty much the same reasoning. I think the depth is there. The experience is 100% there. Painter has been to a Natty before, so him and Sampson are kind of in very similar boats. A lot of experience, no rings, been to a Natty recently, and they can be very good rivals, I think, for this upcoming year. I would love to see a championship game between the two.
Yeah, and I have Houston as number 2 for a lot of the reasons you just said. I just going to the preseason view them as maybe just one tier below Purdue, just because I really don't feel like Houston has a complete game changer in what Purdue has in Braden Smith. Of course, you kind of need some guys to make leaps, particularly the guys who are returning. But again, Kelvin Sampson, amazing coach. You saw what he did and the culture he's built in Houston over the last few years, and especially what they did this past season. Now they have the talent. Tough to put anyone above both Purdue and Houston, but I personally have Purdue just one spot above.
Yeah, no, I can. We kind of just have the same thing flipped, which I think a lot of people are in the same boat right now. My 3, though, is kind of an interesting choice. I'm choosing Duke 3. Like I said before, once again, you can't make Duke bad. They haven't been in any bad scenarios in terms of their transfers or the players they're keeping in. I get it, Coward likely leaves, but Dominic Sarr brings in, without a doubt, at a minimum 10 points per game, by the way, if you want to go into the stat line of it. But Cameron Boozer is going to be great. I do think we see an increased potential from both Evans and Caleb Foster. And then, they're not going to make a Final Four or a Natty in my mind, but winning the ACC and being Duke just kind of gives them that type of vibe. So I'm putting number 3 just to be honestly safe about things. It just feels weird to not put Duke anything lower than that, if you're going to get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. Again, I think Duke will win the ACC, and I think I have a tough time seeing them be lower than a 1 or a 2. Again, though, I just don't know if they really stack up with the rosters of some of the other teams that I have above them, and which is why I'm kind of I guess this is where we stray away from each other. I have BYU as 3rd. Now, BYU's upside, I think, is incredible this year. You can't ignore what they've done in the transfer portal. Of course, landing Rob Wright was huge. They get a point guard to help take some of the pressure off Richie Saunders in the backcourt, who, by the way, could be an All-American this year. Richie Saunders, one of the most underrated players in the sport, might be the most underrated in the sport going to next year, potentially. But of course, it's hard to ignore what he did this past year, being the leading scorer on a BYU team that was really good and had a lottery pick in Egor Demon. But on top of that, you bring in my pick for the number 1 player in this upcoming freshman class. I know other services have him too, but AJ DeBanza, who I think his game is very comparable to Cooper Flagg's. Now, do I think he'll have the season Cooper Flagg did? No, but I think he'll be really, really good out in Provo. And of course, they landed Kadar Davis Jr., who I think is going to be really underrated. I think is already being underrated in the portal cycle in terms of best pickups by programs this year. But I mean, again, he very much fills a glue guy role. He can do a lot defensively, a lot offensively too. And he's going to be like a 4th option on this team. And I definitely think he's going to excel in that role a lot. Kei Bakita, getting him back was big. Definitely brings a new dimension or a different look than most teams being able to play a small ball 5. But you also have Xavier Standing coming off the bench to fill that big spot if Kei Bakita ever goes to the bench or needs a breather. But yeah, I really do like BYU. Of course, we need to see how they play. But let me tell you, their practice film, which they've released so far, looks really, really good. And I think that starting 5 is going to be electric.
I can definitely get behind that. I have BYU a little bit lower. My 4, though, is St. John's. Obviously, I mentioned them before being a Final Four team. I see them as a 1 seed right now. They're likely the front runners of the Big East. I know UConn will challenge them, as they always do. But this is Pitino's best team. I know I said that last year as well, but Pitino gets better every year. That's kind of how he always plays. We're probably going to see an All-American season from Zuby Ejiofor, who is the best returning player. Also, likely healthy season from Bryce Hopkins, who could be an honorable mention in that scenario. Jason Sanan, bench depth from other transfers that Pitino has brought in. It's really hard to not make that team that we saw last year better, which pretty much Pitino knows how to do. He's been in the game long enough, and he likes the portal. It definitely shows with the guys he's bringing in. I honestly think he's on almost every single transfer portal pickup he's ever had, especially at St. John's, if you're looking at guys like R.J. Lewis and Kadari Richmond in particular, from last year at least. But in general, it really feels like this could be their season. I'm not that sold on them just yet, given how it didn't really work out that well last year. If they can somehow manage to get better 3-point shooting, then maybe I'm more convinced, which I think they are going to do through this transfer class. But at the same time, it's hard to not put this team in the top 5. So I think 4 is a really generous, but also reasonable place.
Yeah, and I don't have St. John's very much behind. I don't have them very far behind where you have them. Again, I definitely agree. It's tough to leave them outside the top 5 for what Rick Pitino's done. I'll get into that once I let you guys know where I have them at. But I have Florida as 4. Of course, Boogie Fland. A lot of the stuff we talked about at the beginning of this episode draws back to the reasons why I have him as number 4. I just think they now have a top 5 backcourt in the country between Boogie and Xavier Lee, and just what they're bringing back with Tommy Howe, Ruben Chinilu, and what we think will be Alex Condon. Of course, we'll monitor that situation, give you guys an update if he does return or stays in the draft. But again, I just think that the size that they have, the length, and now the playmaking between both guards, it's going to be a lot to handle for opposing SEC teams this year. I mean, I think they're going to have a great year out in Gainesville. And I mean, they have the championship experience. Tom Golden knows what it takes to win a national championship now. And he really is kind of the analytics darling of college basketball right now. So all their pickups and everything they do, portal-wise and on the actual game floor, is all driven by analytics on top of what basketball heads, the decisions they make. And I think it's just going to make for a really good mix of both, wits with actual play. So I think Florida's going to be really good this year. Definitely have a chance to run it back, repeat as champs. But again, I do think they do need to add a few more spots depth-wise, like I talked about at the beginning of the episode. But I think they're going to have a really good year. So I have them as number 4.
Yeah, once again, I have Florida just a little bit lower than that. My 5 is Kentucky right now. I have been convinced of Big Blue right now, mostly Jalan Love, but also the national title experience of Aberdeen and probably a breakout season from Jaden Quaidens, who I really think could be a top 5 draft pick next year. He kind of had a very underrated freshman year, but that was mostly because of how limited he was at Arizona State, unfortunately, and his late season injury, if I recall. I don't know if they're going to be the number 1 team in the SEC this year. I might give it to Florida, but this team feels very put together. Mark Pope definitely knows what's going on, and this team does have a Final Four ceiling. Definitely feels a lot better than last year, where it was kind of put together players. This feels more concise and coordinated in a way, and it's hard to not leave Kentucky off the list once again, as many of these teams I'm listing as. And 5 might be a little bit higher than most people want to say, but I'm gonna take the chance. I'm gonna put them at 5 right now, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm Kentucky again, not very far behind where you have them either. For my 5th pick, I got St. John's. A lot of the reasons you said are the reasons why I have St. John's top 5. I love what Pitino's done in the portal, but I do think they kind of missed on getting a true point guard. I know they went heavy after Xavier Lee, and I think they would have went after Ian Jackson regardless of being able to land Xavier or not. But the thing that really concerns me with St. John's is the lack of a true point guard. I talked about it, I believe, in some of the other episodes we've recorded. I mean, it's really going to come down to if Ian Jackson's able to convert himself into a true point guard, which I definitely think, well, let's not overthink it here. It's Rick Pitino or Hubert Davis who's the better coach. It's Rick Pitino. And if anyone's going to be able to if anyone's going to be capable of converting Ian to a real point guard, then it's Rick. The thing is, it's hard to ignore Ian Jackson's 9, maybe 7% assist rate from this past season at UNC. Josan Sanon, not a great facilitator either. And Isaiah Sellers, you're bringing in to shoot the ball, and really strictly just that. Now, they did land Dylan Darling from Idaho State, and he was a dynamic player out in the Big West, I believe the conference is. Averaged around 20 points, 6 assists, so he's going to bring playmaking. The thing is, if I very much feel like that's kind of a backup plan if Ian Jackson doesn't work out, and one thing that worries me is Dylan Darling, of course, played at the mid-major level. You never know how guys are going to play at the high-major level until they get there and you actually see them play. He is a little bit undersized, but he is tough. He plays, he guards, so that's definitely going to help with playing for Rick Pitino, and now he requires so much tenacity defensively. But again, the lack of a true point concerns me. Outside of that, I think Rick Pitino's done a really good job. Ian Jackson, really dynamic playmaker. I mean, can break guys down off the dribble. He's going to be able to create a lot of shots and score a lot. Same thing goes with Josan Sanon. I don't think Bobby Hurley was able to tap into that guy's potential the way Rick Pitino will be able to. I think he's going to be great on the wing. Isaiah Sellers is going to be shooting. Between Bryce Hopkins, if he's able to stay healthy, and Zuby Ejiofor, who is my pick for Big East preseason player of the year and potential All-American, they probably had the best front court in the country, I would say, if both guys are healthy and playing at a high level. So yeah, that's pretty much why I got St. John's top 5.
You weren't far behind me. My 6 is BYU, so like I said, a little bit lower. Kind of the same reasoning, but I like AJ DeBanza a lot. I think he's probably going to be the best, maybe second best freshman. I think Peterson gets a little bit more time and a little bit more points per game as a result than AJ, but the role he has is so well carved out, and he has great pieces around him. I'm just not so sure how Kevin Young can actually run his rotation. I get it, they went to the Sweet 16 when they really shouldn't have even made the tournament. If you're looking at them like 5-6 weeks beforehand, I think they're definitely going to be a front runner for the Big 12. They're going to compete with Houston on a regular, Texas Tech as well. Like they're definitely going to be a possible 2, maybe even 1 seed if they really run the numbers. But I think that given the other teams listed before us, the experience that they have and just the reliance on how good AJ is kind of leaves me at a 6. You know, they could definitely be a number one preseason team this year. I'm just not as convinced as maybe I could be. It's just time right now. If the Bansa is that guy, I will regret this decision. Without a doubt.
Yeah, I definitely hear you out there. I mean, how good Debanza is definitely going to determine how good BYU is as a team this year. Like I just talked about, I do not have Kentucky very far behind. Josh did. I have him as number 6. By far, one of the most talented, if not the most talented roster in the country. Just with, I mean, every guy 1 through 14 is capable of going out and going, nuclear on any given night. That's the thing that kind of concerns me with them, though, is you have so many guys who are capable of being big time players, big time rotation guys, that it worries me at some point. Some guys aren't going to play, and how happy can you keep everybody? Kentucky's payroll this year, I mean, we've heard that it could be over $20 million, and I think that probably sounds about right with what they have. Of course, a lot of Kentucky's success this year is dependent on Otega Owe's decision whether to stay in the draft or come back to school. I think he comes back to school. I don't see why he wouldn't. I don't think NBA scouts like Otega Owe all too much. So I definitely think there's no reason not to turn down another year in Lexington. We're going to be making 7 figures. But basically, I mean, their ads in the portal have been great. Probably, I mean, I don't see how they wouldn't have a top 3, probably number 1 ranked transfer class in the country. But again, it's a lot of mouths to feed. But if they're able to keep guys happy and get guys to accept roles, then they're going to be really, really good. And I probably think they are the preseason favorite to win the SEC. I personally would pick Florida, but I think the media would probably lean towards UK, Big Blue Nation. But again, I worry about the amount of cooks in the kitchen if it's going to be too much. But again, if they're able to figure things out, they're going to be really, really good. And even on paper, you can't have them any lower than top 7, I very much feel.
No, I had him at 5, so I can see your point. My 7 is actually UConn. This is honestly a lot in Caravan. I think Caravan is the most experienced player currently in college basketball. Only guy that saw 2 rings. Only guy that really stuck around as long as he did. He's going to be entering his senior year. I honestly thought he could have left 2 years ago. He should have left last year, in my opinion. He's coming back on a completely reloaded roster. We're likely going to see breakout seasons from Stewart, Ross, Silas Damari is going to fit well, I feel. And, I get that St. John's is the Big East front runner, but I think UConn is a great runner-up or a great competition in general. And it's hard, once again, it's very hard to keep just any UConn team ever off the board from the top 10, especially in the era we're in right now. Dan Hurley is not letting up last season. He does not want to be another footnote on the UConn scale for him. He wants that natty. He wants to have what he thought should have been a three-peat. And I think being out for revenge is going to definitely motivate him. And it's going to motivate this team to really get back into the running. I honestly think 7 is a pretty reasonable place to put them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I also have UConn at 7 for a lot of the reasons you just said. I definitely think Dan Hurley addressed portal needs great this offseason. I mean, I think the number 1 need was to get a legit starting caliber point guard with the majority of your NIL budget for the transfer portal to allocate to. And I think Silas Demery Jr. was the perfect guy to get. He's 6'5", kind of fits that Tristan Newton frame that you want for a Dan Hurley point guard, where he's going to be able to back guys down 3-point line, execute their offense a lot smoother than what we saw this past year. I think retention was probably the second biggest thing for UConn this offseason, maybe the first, honestly. You were able to bring back Solo Ball, Terrace Reed Jr., keep Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, who a lot of people thought could be entering the portal. I think we're going to see hopefully a big leap from Jalen Stewart this year, who I think will be in a starting role. And I love what they've added depth-wise, getting guys like Malachi Smith, who were willing to come in and probably accept a bench role, turn down starting jobs elsewhere, probably bigger bags in NIL money. You get guys like that. You have a pretty solid freshman class coming in with the likes of Braylon Mullins, Eric Riba, who will be backing up Terrace Reed at the 5. And Terrace Reed, who has a chance to, I think, give Zuby Ejiofor a run in for Big East Player of the Year, along with Solo Ball, too. So, yeah, and I mean, a lot of UConn season is going to be pending on guys making leaps. But, again, I think they've really addressed their needs in the portal great this offseason. Getting guys back was huge, like Caravan, who probably is the best winner in the sport right now. And to have him stay 4 years in college is really incredible. But yeah, that's why I have UConn at 7.
Yeah, I can, like I said before, the same thing too.
Right.
8 is Florida for me, a little bit bumped down for pretty much the same reason why I had BYU a little lower than Kanaye's. I think that once again, the experience we're getting from bringing in Fland and Thomas Howe coming back. I will say this is made with the assumption Conan does not come back. I personally don't see it happening, but there is still a very good window. But I leave him a little bit lower, mostly because I'm not so sure how Xavier Lee turns out. He looks great. He's been in the mid-major bubble for a little bit too long. I think if he had experience earlier on in his career, then maybe that helps. But this is his first real scenario being in a power conference. Obviously, Florida was honestly an interesting choice. The SEC is, as I've said before, was probably the best conference that he could fit in as a mid-major transfer, but I don't know where he fits. Is he the number one option? Is he the two, the three? If Condon comes back, where does he play? There's too many questions on his line of things that makes me think that although Florida can definitely be a returnee to the Final Four or a back-to-back type of team, there are too many questions right now for me to leave them any higher. So 8 is the most respectable place as of right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely hear you out with the concerns about Xavier Lee. I mean, I also share those concerns too. At my number 8 spot, I got Duke. For a lot of the reasons that we talked about when we discussed Dame Sarr committing to Duke. Again, this roster just head to toe doesn't scare me the way they did last year. I definitely think at the wing spot, they look really good between Sarr and Caden Boozer, or Cameron Boozer, my mistake. But just the guards worry me a little bit, and the big men. I mean, between Malik Brown, who's going to be in a bigger role, Big Pat, and just again, I really don't know how much room for growth there really is with Caleb Foster anymore. Caden Boozer, again, we kind of got to wait and see how he does to really know how good of a player he is. Same thing with Isaiah Evans. How much can he really grow from just being strictly a three-point shooter this past year? If he can improve and be more of a combo guard type of guy, then I think that's going to be really important. But again, they're too talented to leave out your top 10. And they're like I mentioned, I don't see them being any lower than a 1 or a 2 seed. And they probably do end up winning the ACC this year.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as you said before.
Right.
I do like how we had a ton of teams that we've like flip-flopped around. Like you have Florida higher, I have Duke higher.
Right.
We've kind of merged in between, which I think is a pretty fair choice. My 9 is Arkansas, by the way. I think, once again, this is regardless of the Carter Knox and Ado Thero decision. Technically, they are considering coming back. I think both of them get drafted. But regardless of that matter, I think Cal is producing his best team in Arkansas right now. I get it, last year was more of a Fox good machine that they were creating. It didn't really work out, but they did make the Sweet 16. Arguably could have made an Elite 8, and who knows from there. But I think Cal's experience at producing is good. The freshman talent he's bringing in is, once again, and as is always, great. But the stuff he's building around the team is pretty good. Do I think they can win the SEC as of right now? Probably not. I don't know if they have a ceiling above an Elite 8, if I'm not going to lie. I do think if one of Carter Knox or Duke do come back, then maybe we have talks about in Arkansas at Final Four, Natty perhaps. But this team is underrated as of right now, and I think that Cal is starting to get things pieced together out in Fayette.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I have Arkansas as one of the teams just outside my top 10. I think they're going to have a better year in the regular season than what they did this year. I think DJ Wagner will finally kind of come into his own and really break out
He's
the way
guy
that
I would expect.
yeah, I mean, I think he's going to break out the way we really thought he was going to this past season. But at my number 9 spot, I have Louisville. That was the team I previously had in our last way too early top 10 as my number 1 team. Of course, that was before a lot of the moves in the portal and changes, guys coming back. But I still very much feel that I don't know if there's a team in the program in the country that I think had a better transfer portal than Louisville. Really, really love what they've added in the portal between Isaac McNeely, who was a 14-point per game scorer at Virginia, is going to bring a lot of defense, of course, playing for that Virginia program that thrives off their defense so much. Ryan Conwell, I think, is arguably the best, maybe not shooter, but shot maker, if that makes sense, in this portal cycle. Just, I mean, the incredible tough shot making he brings is really, it was so fun to watch this past year at Xavier. And I mean, he did at Indiana State too. And I think he's going to fit great at Louisville. And then you're bringing a really talented top 10 guy in Mikael Brown Jr., who probably play the point. Not positive he'll start, but again, he's going to bring playmaking regardless of if he's coming off the bench or in a starting role. And then you get Adrian Woolley from Kennesaw State too, who brings definitely a different skill set. I'm really excited to see him play in a Louisville uniform for Pat Kelsey. But you also got some retention between Javon Hadley and Casey and Pryor, who Casey probably was really good before he went down with the injury this past year. And I think if he comes back to form, then he could be really, really good in the front court for them this year. Same thing goes with Hadley. But I really do like how this roster stacked up for Pat Kelsey going into year 2 for him at Louisville. And you also got guys like James Scott and Ali Khalifa who have chances to break out as well. So I'm really excited to see Pat Kelsey in year 2. I definitely think they could pose a really big threat to Duke in the ACC. I personally probably have them as number 2 in the ACC preseason poll. But again, they definitely have a chance to overtake Duke at some point in the season if it all works out, which I personally think it'll work out, but I don't see them overcoming Duke. But again, I think they're going to have a really big year.
Certainly. And I do have Louisville, and I will mention, I will say the scenario has kind of decreased for me. I had Louisville a lot higher recently, or in the past, but more recently, mostly due to the Ali Khalifa ineligibility decision. I think that they've kind of been bumped down a bit, but I definitely agree with you. They're probably the number 2 option in the ACC and could definitely compete with Duke. And they're going to compete with Kentucky as well. That's going to be a great rivalry that we're finally going to see. My number 10, a little bit of a wild take right now, but I'm going with Arizona. I do feel surprisingly good about this team. They are replacing a lot of minutes, especially from Caleb Love's side of things, but also Clark Bryant. But there is a lot of space that's being pretty well used. Lorso is probably going to have a breakout season per se. He's just going to get a lot more minutes, so it's probably going to be doubling his points, if anything else. Freshman Koa Pete is probably going to be in that main ball handling role. And I think that in terms of how well they're going to play in the Big 12, that it probably will be similar. I don't think they're going to have that slow start that they had last year, which really put them behind the 8 ball. But they still managed to do pretty well, in honestly, my opinion. I didn't really think they were going to get the Sweet 16 or the tournament at all after that 4-5 start, if anyone recalls. It is kind of a big push because there are still some holes in the lineup that I don't know if Lloyd can fully fill. The portal has pretty much provided a lot for them, on top of how well they've kept players as long as they're in the freshman incoming. They're coming freshmen. Do I know if their ceiling's above an Elite Eight? Probably not. The way I'm kind of viewing it right now is that if they do make anything beyond that, it's probably too early to tell. But the upside here is good enough for me to put them in this top 10 as of right now, at least.
Yeah, I definitely hear you about the upside of Arizona. I definitely think their upside is great. I personally have them just outside my top 10. I view them more as a top 15 type of team. But at my number 10 spot, I have Texas Tech. And really, I originally probably going into this video, or maybe a week or so ago, had them a little bit higher than 10. But at this point, I definitely felt it was up in the air as to whether Darian Williams was going to, if he returned to school, come back to Texas Tech or not. At this point, I'm pretty sure he's adamant that he will not be returning to Texas Tech. And for that reason, I'm really giving them the benefit of the doubt of having a potential player of the year candidate in JT Toppin coming back to school for them next year. But when you take them off this team, they're probably a bubble team, if I'm being honest with you. They'd have had some nice pickups in the portal between Lawan Watts coming from Washington State, and Donovan Atwell coming over from UNC Greensboro. But outside of that, they've lost a lot. They've lost, of course, Darian Williams. They lost Kevin Overton. They're losing Federico. And again, I just worry they don't have a lot of shooting whatsoever. They're gonna put a lot on the plate of Donovan Atwell, which again kind of only averaged around 13, 14 at the mid-major level. Wasn't really a great playmaker. I just think they lack both shooting and playmaking in their backcourt this year. And how much can you really ask JT Toppin to do? I'm sure he will be in the running for a National Player of the Year, and I will be shocked if he won't be. But again, that's really your kind of only dude on this team next year who's capable of doing that. And again, they've lost a lot, and you take JT Toppin off this team, then they're really not all that good, if I'm being honest with you. But again, that's a National Player of the Year that they have on the roster. It's tough to take them out of the top 10 because of that. And for right now, I still have them in my top 10.
Yeah, I will say, and we've mentioned this, and I mentioned this with the Louisville choice. I have Louisville, Texas Tech, and Michigan as the honorable mentions for this list. I think Michigan's the big one to talk about right now because of the Yaxel decision. It is growingly likely that he's going to be drafted in the first rounds and will likely stay as a result, which is a very big blow and will probably take them out. If he does come back, or he does come to Michigan, he will likely make Michigan a top 5 team. I would say, and possibly a front runner in the Big Ten against Purdue. That said, they do have great replacements in Ademar at the 5, but Yaxel is really supposed to be one of, if not the best, transfer players to really arrive here, and it definitely would have changed Michigan a lot. I like what Kanaye said about Texas Tech. I'm not as convinced as I was maybe a few weeks ago, so that's why I'm bumping them down. And like I said before, with Louisville, the Ali Khalifa decision is kind of weighing me down right now, but only time will tell with them, really.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think that pretty much takes care of everything we have for this video today. Again, like we talked about in our top 10, I mean, these teams are going to be so loaded, the ones at the top of the sport next year. And I gotta say, I'm just super ecstatic to see what's going to unfold with this upcoming year of college basketball. I think we're in for a really, really good season. The teams at the top are just so stacked, and I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. But again, please, as always, engage with our content any way you can. It really does help with growing this channel. So please continue to do that. And of course, please just tell other people about it. It helps with growing the channel as well. But until the next episode we give you guys, we'll see you all next time.